Hey everyone, welcome to Vibe Dojo. Now this is our first episode where we're going to dive into what vibe coding is. And that is really what this channel is dedicated to really dive into what is possible with vibe coding, what you can do, what are some of the different principles that you need to keep in mind when you're vibe coding, whether it be a mobile application, a web application, virtual reality application as well. And so let me give a quick introduction to ourselves. My name is Jeff Batts. I am the owner of Learning Dojo, and this is kind of a fairly new channel that we're starting that's an offshoot of Learning Dojo. And it really started as Destri, my friend Destri, which I'll give him a chance to introduce himself, as we were talking about this and how vibe coding is such a big thing right now. We wanted to, as trainers, make sure that everyone kind of knew what those different principles were, what different applications were, and to really talk and dive deep into that. So Destri, go ahead and introduce yourself, and you can dive into a little bit how this conversation started.
You bet. Thanks, Jeff. So my name is Destri Hildenbrand with Destry One Kenobi LLC, and I'm a learning technology consultant. And as Jeff said, we started really talking about vibe coding, what it is, what it can do. And it just so happened that we were at a conference in Orlando, and we were playing a little hooky, and we went to Disney World, right? So we were roaming around, this area of inspiration and excitement and all kinds of fun stuff. And we were stuck in the Seven Dwarves Mine Train line for an extra 15 minutes. Something happened, it went down.
It broke down.
It did, it broke down or something. And all of a sudden, we just started talking about these types of concepts. How can we, from my perspective, as an instructional designer, as a learning developer, how can we grow with this and utilize it in a way that makes it easier for me to build really cool stuff? Right? So once we had this conversation, I realized I got to go watch Jeff's videos. So I went and watched all of Jeff's videos, and I started getting inspired by it. So then the next time we went to Orlando, which actually wasn't too far from the first time we went, we once again, maybe we did, maybe we didn't. I don't know. We might have been at Disney one more time, and just kind of hang out and talking about it. And I was like, hey, I've got all these ideas, and it was very much kind of one of those chocolate and peanut butter things. Jeff's like, hey, I'm really approaching this from a developer standpoint. And I'm like, hey, I was really thinking about like learning games and everything from an instructional design standpoint. And together we really started kind of talking. It's like, hey, we should do something with this, and we should share it out with everybody. And that's kind of where this sort of started.
Yeah, and it really did. I mean, for those of you, as a little bit of a background to Destry and I, is we are Disney fanatics, especially Disney park fanatics. So, but because we're also technologists, that's what we talk about. We're at a conference, and so we're in lines. We're talking about what's possible, what you can do, different things like that. So it felt it felt perfect to be able to just start up this channel to talk about, and as trainers ourselves, to talk about what it is. Because initially, when I heard the term vibe coding, I did not like it. I did not like the term. As a developer myself, I'm like, well, that kind of seems like lazy coding. When you talk about vibe, it seems like it's somebody just relaxing and not really knowing the concepts, and which in a way is kind of true. You could actually not know everything that's going behind the scenes, but I think if you don't know some of the initial concepts and the terms and other things like that, you could actually get yourself into trouble, or especially when it comes to like security or databases, other things like that. But if you know some of those concepts and how to handle those, I think that's where I started to come around with the term, because it's not necessarily lazy coding. It's basically the way it removes a little bit of the barriers. Really where the term came into play. And this is who coined the term, Andre Karpathy, if I'm saying his name right, where he tweeted out, there's a new kind of coding I call vibe coding, where you fully give into the vibes, embrace exponentials, and forget that the code even exists. So thinking about that, I started to change my tune a little bit, because it's not necessarily about not knowing those concepts, but it's more around it's almost removing barriers, which you and I have talked about, barriers of not having to know every single version of code that's out there, but still understanding the principles, and then being able to just create something without having to know all the specifics. So, when you first heard the term, what did you think?
When I first heard the term, I really didn't, I wasn't exactly sure like how it was really going to help. And until I really got in there, like I said before, I watched some of your videos. I was following some other people online like Mel Milloway, and there was just some really cool stuff happening. And I was like, gosh, this really seems to be an effective way to utilize AI to help me build cool stuff. And that's really what I'm always looking to do. How can I build, better learning experiences? How can I incorporate different things? And one of the things that I always got stuck on was, man, I have this vision, but I just can't bring it to life. And I get stuck. Over the years, I've learned JavaScript and I've learned C#, whatever it is that I needed in order to do it. But then I realized that if I don't have to spend all that time researching how to do one specific thing, I can just say, hey, I wanted to do this thing. Like the doors just opened. It was like, wow. It was like this epiphany, right? The clouds parted, everything. And it was like, holy cow, this is insane. How much more efficient I can be and how much I can get these ideas out of my head and into the screens and into the experiences. So that's really where I landed on it.
And I really like that because you're able to, like you said, like we've talked about, remove barriers and see, instead of having to spend a lot of time on a specific code language to do something or even hack your way through it, now you could just have it prompt. You can just prompt to go in there and do that. And that's, to me, I think, in the e-learning development world, we've always kind of been, I don't want to say stuck, but we've always been, using these tools that are like similar to PowerPoint. But they're a little bit more restrictive. And don't get me wrong, I love the tools. I love to be able to hack them and just be able to open them up. But this kind of opens up a lot more possibilities to be able to create something like a mobile application. I've always been interested in mobile development, specifically iOS development. And I've tried learning the code several different times, but then I just get distracted with normal life, right? But now I'm able to go in and do some of that just by prompting. And so I don't necessarily even need to know all the specifics of that language, but I still understand those principles of like what a variable is, how you save storage, things like that are now I'm able to create in different languages without knowing the specific syntax of that language.
And I think that's where a lot of folks in L&D, especially as content creators, as just instructional designers, that's where we've all landed. Like we've used those same tools and we've learned about concepts like we're working with, when we're working with images and videos and we're, working with variables and setting things up. So we have a high level understanding, but for the most part, when we were learning how to be instructional designers or learning professionals, there weren't a lot of coding classes involved. So, that was one of the, again, like you said, the barriers to entry for this. So with using vibe coding, you're able to, it becomes much more frictionless to be like, hey, I have this idea. I want to do this thing. Let's create this web page. Let's create, this JavaScript piece that fits into one of my tools already, So I think that with as more people get to know vibe coding, it's going to really open up a lot more doors for us just in the industry to be able to really up our game when it comes to creating learning content, quality learning content and experiences for our learners and teams.
Yeah, and I think there's two things that really have kind of helped with the industry to get us to this point. One thing was some of the tools that we currently work with, opening up their API and having us, giving us capability to customize that. Like I think of Storyline in their JavaScript API. And what you can do with that now is when I started using AI to code a little bit more, I was then able to, instead of having to know code in these JavaScript snippets, I was able to use AI to generate a JavaScript snippet for me and then just copy and paste it into Storyline. So now I was able to customize and expand upon my skill set a little bit more than I was before. So I think that kind of created a shift of using AI, not necessarily vibe coding, but using AI. And I guess you're coding still, you're generating JavaScript, but using AI to customize Storyline and extend it. But also number two was able to, when Rise introduced their code block, because now you could go directly into ChatGPT, Claude, or any other tools, and you can create an entire application and basically just copy and paste it into Rise. And now you're not stuck with just what comes out of the box. One of the reasons I didn't use Rise heavily was because it wasn't customizable. Storyline was customizable. I could create variables and conditions, but all of a sudden this Rise block opened up a lot of possibilities. I could create a full game, copy and paste in the code, vibe code it, and then copy and paste in that code into Rise, and all of a sudden, oh, now I can have that along with my quiz, along with the tracking, because even if you just vibe code it right into ChatGPT, right, you can't track it. You can't, unless you added like X API or other things, you can't really track it.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of shifted the game a little bit with both Storyline and Rise, that kind of opening up and this code block.
100%. And I think that these are tools that typically learning developers already have, so we don't have to buy anything new. And even some of these AI tools, there's free versions out there that you don't have to have subscriptions to that can still be really helpful in doing vibe coding. So I think that as we start to see this sort of blow up a little bit more, more people are going to realize, hey, I have access to the things I need, and I already have some existing skills that are going to transfer over into this new space.
Yeah. And so it really comes back to the interpretation when I first heard it. And like you see in the slide here, and to me, it's all about creating human readable language. And so instead of having to know the specifics of code, you're basically just saying, hey, I want to create a button that pops this up, or pops up a message when they click on it. But if you start to understand the terms and you start to understand, the concepts, you may know that to pop something up, you use what's called a modal. So that's where, that idea, even though we're using the human readable language to be able to go in and describe what we want, I think it provides a little bit more context if you also add those types of terms and you understand those terms and things like that. But
yeah, and as you learn those terms, right? I mean, a lot of us, a lot of people didn't necessarily know them ahead of time. So you can just say, hey, I need a window that pops up after I push, this button. And a lot of times when I ask for things like that, it'll come back and say, yeah, here's a modal that'll do that. And I'm like, oh, it's called a modal. Okay, great, right? It does spit back like some information ahead of before it gives you code. And again, and you're right, just talking to it like you're talking to somebody else. Like I imagine it like I'm talking to one of my developers. Hey, I got this vision. I got this idea. Here's what I think we should do. What kind of questions do you have to help me flesh this out so you know what I'm asking for? Right?
Yeah.
And like as you have here, anyone can build amazing things by just talking out what it is that they want. And sometimes it's as easy as, hey, I need this thing, and it goes, I got you. And it sends it out there and you're like, this is perfect. And sometimes it's like, oh yeah, I've got something, I think I understand. Here it is. And you're like, not quite, let's work on it, right? And the amount of time and energy and resources and cycles that you save by doing this, it's crazy. It's crazy how much faster this can be now.
Yeah, and it does. Sometimes when it spits out what you don't want, I think people give up. But like even you and I have experience of managing developers, and you've realized that some developers, every developer kind of interprets it a little bit differently. Yeah. And so you sometimes, if you don't get the right output, I think it's about going back and describing it a little bit more, or detailing it out a little bit more as well. Yeah. But the content itself that we're producing is not different. And I think that's important to know, because even though these barriers are gone, that of being able to create a website without having to know code, you still are creating a website in the same languages that we've been creating websites for years, or our apps or stuff like that. So, and those frameworks do get updated and they get new features and other things like that. So it does help to be familiar with that. But I think so that's why I think going back to the terms, understanding what some of these terms are, like modals and accordions and variables and conditions and other things like that, could help you describe and avoid some of those challenges of it not spitting out the right code or not spitting out the right solution.
Exactly. And as you get going, you can even talk about frameworks, and you can talk about APIs, right? You mentioned that earlier. There's maybe some people watching that are like, I don't know an API from, anything else that I'm looking at. So understanding what some of these terms are and being able to talk with it using those are the types of things that I myself have educated myself along too. Like I knew some stuff, but I didn't know, just in the 3-4 months that I've really been like aggressive aggressively vibe coding, I've learned so much about what it is that I need to do, how it is I need to talk to it. And like you said, sometimes you're going to ask it for something, it's not going to know. It's going to give you something that you didn't want. And just remember, it's never you, it's the machine. So just, it's always about just trying to explain it to the machine a little bit better. But your vision is still awesome. So keep that in mind.
I like that. And it's important to call out that most of these vibe coding tools like Cursor or Lovable or Replets or other tools like that, they have a chat mode. So you can, if you're trying to work through or you don't know exactly how to describe it, you can turn on the chat mode, which basically doesn't prompt anything. And you could say, this is what I'm trying to do. Ask me some questions like you had mentioned. Help me define this a little bit more. Or even create like a full product requirements document where you can go in and describe exactly, here's feature 1, here's feature 2, here's feature 3. So both ways are, I think, you could approach it in either way. And you could approach it with a more detailed initially, or you could approach it with just, step by step or help me kind of work through this. And it comes down to like anyone can build these amazing apps just like through using natural language. But I think where it changes though is instead of having to be the developer, you're now like almost a product manager or an architect. And so I always compare it to more like I don't need to know all of the specific syntax of a code, but I still need to have that vision. I still need to know and understand some of the components in order for this to work. Or if I do, vibe coding becomes a whole lot smoother, a whole lot easier as well. So we're kind of shifting roles a little bit. And really, to me, a product manager, just to cover some things, and I'll let you chime in here, Destry, but a product manager will define the vision, the outcomes, the flow of how the application works. And to me, a product manager needs to be an expert inside of the tool. So they need to know exactly how the tool will function, what the goal of the tool is as well. And I think that aligns perfectly with learning development because we need to know the objectives. We need to know why we're training something or, what we want by the end of the training. So it kind of is very similar to an instructional designer and a product manager, but you're really thinking of it as I don't know, it's a little bit of a shift to think of it as a product manager there.
100%. And I think that everything you said is spot on. And really, you're just talking to a developer and you're like, hey, I've got ideas and this is what I think the vision of this, once you've defined a goal, once you've defined your objectives, once you have a plan in place, you could be like, hey, I really want to execute this in X, Y, Z. Honestly, I think of it a little bit too as if you don't really know exactly what you want, you can sort of be the idea guy and you just throw stuff at your tool. And it's like, hey, I'm thinking about this, thinking about that. I give it some images that I like. I give it some ideas about the games that I enjoy. I give it some websites to look at. Hey, I like this. I like what it's doing here. Can you do something like that, but with this? Just really just kind of spitballing a little bit. So having a plan is great and knowing exactly what you want. But I find that it works really well as just a thought partner too sometimes. Obviously it's not it's thinking, but it's not thinking like I think.
And I think spitballing is a good idea to learn. Like to me, just getting in there, and if you don't know exactly what application you want to build, that's okay. Just get in there and say, hey, well, I'm thinking of this, and then chat with it. But then, okay, now as you start to, the product starts to come to life, right? Or the game starts to come to life. I think that's when you start to have more ideas. And you're like, okay, well, now what about this? What if I add this? What if I do that? And that really, to me, one of the most useful concepts was like focusing on one feature at a time. Instead of trying to overload it with like, okay, I want it to do this, and this. You basically say, okay, now I want it to add a task. Okay, now I want the task to have a description. I want me to be able to modify the text in the description, like make it bold, things like that. And it does take more prompts to do, but just like, if you're trying to give a developer, and what we've talked about is you're using AI as your development team, you wouldn't overload the developer with too many things unless you really detail them out specifically, but they still work on them one at a time. So you go in and implement this feature and implement that feature, and you're doing different iterations and different implementation as well. So I don't know if that's the same with you on your experience.
If you think about it, it's just like having like Jira tasks or Trello, right? I mean, you're adding in the features that you're looking to do and how to do it. But yeah, and everybody starts with, I want everything all at once. And then when it doesn't give you everything all at once, it's like, oh, well, it must not be working, or I must be doing it wrong. No, it just can't take it all in. Like it spits back things, it hallucinates, it forgets stuff, it does all kinds of weird stuff, and it does different things depending on the tool you're using too, right? Sometimes ChatGPT does something that Claude doesn't, but Claude does something that ChatGPT doesn't. And, there's all these kinds of little nuances that happen when you're using all the different tools. So yeah, I think that, really just using it as your thought partner, like I said, and like you said, spitballing, right? We're just ideating. And that's what a lot of instructional design is to start off with. You're working with SMEs to get content. You're trying to figure out how to deliver that content in the most effective way possible. And then you come back to your SMEs afterwards and you're like, hey, this is how we're thinking about doing it. What do we want to change? What do we want to do? And, AI just becomes another part of your team in that particular process.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's most applications, it's like iterative. Like even I consider e-learning courses an application because it's something that is an experience for the learner. It is something that you deliver. So it's almost like a product that you deliver. And so it does have a life cycle. Okay, at what point does this content no longer exist? Or at what point do we need to update the content? But also, if you're looking at it as like a product manager, you're understanding the user. You need to understand what the pain points, like if the learner is going through the course and the navigation is not very useful. I mean, those are the kinds of things you need to understand. So once you get past the exploratory kind of field, I think it's then important to go in and, understand exactly what you're building and the pain points of the end user and what the end user is going to need in order for them to actually use the application. Because you could spend a whole lot of time to get something out there, but if you never really understood what the need was, then you're not delivering the right tool. And so it kind of goes back to the drawing board there as well.
100%. And that's the cycle of instructional design. So not everything is evergreen,
Yeah. And there's a lot that we could talk about. There's a lot that we could kind of dive in. And I think this initial conversation of what vibe coding is, which is essentially just, testing it out, exploring it. It's removes some of the barriers to like code and web developments. I mean, I'm teaching a class right now at a university on how to create a portfolio. And this is the first time that this semester that we used Lovable to create the portfolio. In years past, we've always used like Google Sites or something like that, which was a lot more restrictive. But with Lovable, they could really create anything. So I'm having people that have never done any development whatsoever go in and create a portfolio that has a carousel and a modal. It has pop-ups. It has links to interactive courses. Like, to me, it was kind of mind-blowing of people who are coming in brand new to this and the ability that they have to be able to create this type of content.
Yeah, and it's, anybody, and I really mean that, anybody who can type on their keyboard can put some ideas down into an AI tool and get some content back, right? How good that content is kind of like you and I have been talking. It's all about, iteration and revisions and ideating, like all these things go together. And again, I think that these are all skills that as learning professionals we've had to build throughout our career in a lot of the different projects that we do, whether it's in a project management role, whether it's in an ID role, whether it's in a content creator role, right? We're following or a part of all of these things. And again, AI just becomes part of that team, and how we integrate it to be just another thought partner and an assistant in what we're doing. That's the big thing. That's the challenge.
And I think that's important to know, because I think that's where the fear is of a lot of people is like, okay, will this take my job? But to me, if you're the one leading it, I mean, you are the manager. You are the one that's actually, it's not going to create something unless you tell it to create something. Yeah. So if you're the one taking the lead on that, I think that's where your job security is, because you're creating, if you're solving problems and you're providing solutions to that, I don't understand why a company would get rid of you. I mean, you're doing it faster and quicker, and you're able to do that with AI. I mean, like, to me, that's the golden employee. If I was an employer, it's someone that can go in and solve the problems, deliver solutions. And so that would be my full recommendation, is to embrace it as a partner, like what we've been talking about. It's someone as part of your team that can help you create some of the solutions for your company.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to use the resources you have available, even if it's AI, right? Like, all the resources are going to help you to grow, upskill, and make yourself as valuable as you can.
Yeah. So with the amount of time that we have left, I don't want these episodes to go too long, because we're going to have plenty of episodes. We'll come back. We'll do tutorials. We'll dive into specific tools and everything like that. But I did want to have a little bit of a show and tell. So what I want to do is show 2 different applications on my side, and then Destri, I'll let you show 2 different applications that you've been working on, and then just talk about like what the possibilities are to get people excited. And then in other episodes, we'll dive into specific tools, or Destry will walk me through exactly how he built a game, and I'll ask questions along the way. So those are the kinds of episodes that we are going to cover. And if you want you have a specific idea of what we should cover, make sure that you comment down below and say, hey, I'd love to have you guys talk about this, or I want to know more about that tool. So go ahead and make that comment. But to show it off, since I'm sharing my screen already, there's 2 things that I actually want to show. This first one is more of like a micro-learning type of course. And so I just want to test it out. I still love Storyline, still love Rise, but I wanted to test out, could I create a micro-learning type of course, a learning experience using Vibe code? So everything you see here, I didn't touch any code at all. And so right here, as I go through it, you can see it's a very simple type of experience. Up here, you have kind of the segmented controls. On the left-hand side, you have a menu where you can jump to different pages. And the different examples, I know the type of examples that Destry is going to show. I'm more like boring, I guess, but like different courses. Destry's going to show some games, but to me, this is what gets me excited, is like different like scenarios that you can create, or getting audio to play, quiz questions, and you can see the feedback from the quiz questions, calling out different things as like a quote and stuff, different modals, so like the pop-ups, having these as different learning interactions, like videos, accordions. And so all of this, I just had to describe, here's an accordion, I want a flashcard. And all of this was created, even this confetti that's kind of dropping down at the end here, all of that was created by Vibe code. So just telling it, I want this, I want to have this first page to be text and image. I want the second page to be an accordion where it expands out. I want the third page to be a flashcard. So you could create a full experience like that. But you can also create a full application. So I'm going to show this kind of task manager, and this one is in Lovable. That first experience was actually built in Cursor. But in this case, I'm built a full application where you have a login. And that login requires a database. And then each user has their own projects. Now, in that project, you can have different tasks. And in each task, you can have different descriptions. You can have priorities. You can have due dates. You can have subtasks. You can have progress notes where you keep track of that. I mean, this just wasn't built overnight. This is something I've been vibe coding since February of this year. But it was like, each like little feature that you see here was probably a couple of hours each day of just spending on vibe coding, of like, I want to have a focus on feature that when it's enabled and then you save task, it basically shows a star icon next to that task. So those are things that you can do to show kind of the range of just creating an e-learning course to creating a full project management application. That's what you could do with this vibe coding. Both of them, I didn't touch any code, essentially. And so that is, and I've created a lot of other things. That's just a couple of examples here. But I'm going to let Destry share some of his examples as well.
All right, let me pull them up here. So you're right. I did go a different direction. It doesn't mean you're boring. It just means
yes,
my brain. It just means my brain went different directions. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just share my tabs in this one. So when I very first started, one of the things that I was sort of looking at was, how can I just get started and build some stuff, right? So how can I just make these things kind of interesting? And I went to, all right, well, what are all the games and stuff that I really enjoyed as a kid? And I was actually teaching a class on using AI to vibe code. Right? And I was like, okay, everybody, let's build a game. Think of your favorite Atari game when you were a kid, right? And this wasn't necessarily my favorite, but it made sense for me to try this out just to show everybody. But essentially, and again, I didn't touch any code either. I just said, hey, I've got all kinds of ideas that I want to do here, but I really want this to be a Space Invaders clone, right? So we started off, and there it is.
And do you mind muting it?
Yeah, I'll mute it here. But yeah, so you can go through, and I just said, hey, I just need to make it this way. We're going to have 3 levels. I need to have all of the features of what happened before. And as we go, right, I was like, okay, so let's say, again, low-hanging fruit, there really wasn't a reason behind it. And I know the tenured IDs out there will be like, you shouldn't build games unless you have an idea of what it is that you wanted to do, right? But the idea here was that you also can unlock different achievements along the way, and it asks you questions about the topic that you're doing, right? So just having things in there and trying it out. I was playing it on my mobile phone one time, and it didn't work very well, so it created these extra pieces here for me, so we made it kind of both ways. But again, this was one of the early ones that I did, and I was just like, hey, I'm just, again, ideating. Once you built the Space Invaders clone, I now want to make it 3 levels, right? So now I can go 3 levels. Now I want to add some questions, and then we added some questions in there. Now I want to make it so that at the end, it gives you a total points, and you get X amount of points for each question you get right on top of it, right? So I was just thinking about all the different game mechanics that I've used in my life and the things that I enjoyed. And as I was playing it, I was like, oh, you know what's missing? Noises for when I do this. Or when we shoot the UFO at the top, it didn't do this thing, right? So that was one of them there that I did. So,
and I think that's it. While you're bringing up the next one, I think that's an important concept, because learning, I think sometimes people are afraid of like, oh, you need to have a plan for this game. You need to have like all of that. And I hear about that in the learning field, but sometimes you don't know exactly what to build until you try it out. So I suggest going in and just building whatever and just learning the tool. And then you can formulate that plan. So almost like going backwards a little bit, seeing what's possible, going backwards and formulate that plan. I'm not saying don't have like a learning strategy, but when you're learning something new, like vibe coding, dive in and just explore whatever, create something just for fun.
Exactly. It's like anything else, right? I know this isn't mine, but it was described to me one time that when you're figuring something out, you're just shoveling a bunch of sand into a box and you're going to build it into some sort of castle later, right? I got all these ideas and all these things. I'm just shoveling it in and we're going to figure it out. So this one's a little bit more in process. I was actually just playing around with this one last night. But the idea here is that I was thinking about the different games that I really enjoyed as a kid. And I was like, oh, you know what I really liked is those point and click games, right? So I love the old CRT monitors and how they popped up and everything. And again, this is all just me talking to, and I built this in Claude and ChatGPT, right? I use Claude until my credits run out, and then I jump over to ChatGPT and see how it goes. So it's kind of a cross between the two. And then you're able to go in and actually have kind of a point-and-click adventure game, right? And I called it Risk Quest, and we're risk investigators at a local trading company, and we have to go in and try to figure out why things are a little wonky. So essentially, it's like those old games. LucasArts used to build a lot of these, like Maniac Mansion and Zach McCracken and the Alien Mindbenders and stuff that I used to love playing on my uncle's like old Amiga computer, right? And I was like, okay, let's just add some content. I want to look at the different things that are here. All right, I was like, I need all the responses to be snarky too, right? And then we kind of work together to make out some fun kind of snarky responses. But I can also, pick things up, and that progresses me through the game. You'll see down here, I now have one of the risk insights that I need in order to do it. But then I was also like, hey, you know what would be cool is if I created like a locked drawer, and now I have a puzzle that I have to solve on top of it. I can thank my friend Dr. Rachel Arpin for inspiring me with her escape game ideas and stuff. But I was like, oh, so how do you figure that out, right? Oh, well, I don't know what the code is just yet. So now I got to look around and find a 4-digit code to do it. And these are the types of things, if I come up here and use the computer, hey, there's a password. I got to figure out the password, right? So these are the puzzles and things that I loved working through. And the idea behind this one was just, hey, what are some functional strategy type games that you could play, that you could put in real world scenarios? Like how could we, like if it's risk investigation, or if it could be compliance, right? It could be, it could be IT, safety and things like that, right? So there's all kinds of different things you could do, but I just went in and I was like, okay, let's start here. It gave me a bunch of blocks and I just blocked everything out. And then, in fact, I'll go back here just real quick, just to kind of show the history of this game.
And it's important to call out that this is actually inside of Rise, right?
Yeah, this is inside of Rise. This is what really inspired me to really get in there. I wasn't using Lovable or Cursor. I'm not as familiar with those as Jeff is, although I'm still watching his videos trying to get better. But this is all just using the code block in Rise. And as you can see here, this was how it started, right? And this is just iterations like we had talked. All right, now he's this weird smiley dude. Okay, now we're going to figure that out. And now just little things, right? All right, we got some risk behaviors we got to figure out. Inventory upgrades. I can grab stuff and I now have an inventory window. But all of the different things, one at a time, I was just like, oh, let's see if this works. And you'll see I added some buttons here, and you'll see I took some of those buttons away as we continue on because I realized they weren't necessary later on. But you're going to have ideas that show up and do things, and some of them work and some of them don't. But this is how you sort of iterate on the whole thing. And I'll send this link to you too, and we can share it so everybody can take a look at it and just kind of get an idea of what it looks like too. But these are all the types of things that this is how I sort of iterate on these things. I think about all the different games that I loved when I was growing up, and even the ones I still play now. And I was like, okay, how can I make this functional from a learning standpoint? How do we incorporate these things to make it, I know people don't want to play games and have fun at work, I guess, but I think it's always great to have some of those opportunities to put stuff like that in there. And I've used it in some of this my client work that I do too. Matching games or scenario-based stuff, similar to what you were showing just a little bit ago. So there's so many possibilities. And like you said, we're going to be breaking a lot of these down and talking through how we build them. You give us some ideas of yours, and we'll build them live. We'll see what happens, right? So
yeah. So this is, and that's really the idea of this channel, is to dive into these topics and to come out with these episodes. But on our vibedojo.ninja website, we're also going to have full courses. So we'll release courses on how to vibe code a game, courses like what vibe coding is in general. And so make sure that you stay tuned for those different resources as we start to create them as well. But like Destri mentioned, if you have ideas, feel free to comment down below and say, hey, I've been trying to do this, or I'm trying to integrate into this API to do something. Those are the kinds of things we want to know so we can build out our backlog of videos as well. We still have plenty to talk about, plenty to cover. We've only covered 2 different applications that we've worked on each, essentially, and we can dive more into maybe even bring in somebody who's never really coded anything and walk them through how to vibe code stuff. So we have a lot of ideas, so make sure that you like and subscribe this video so it reaches more people. Also, hit the bell notification so you get notified of all future videos as they come out. That really helps our channel, allows us to grow and to expand and to reach more developers, Vibe developers like yourself. That's all we have for today. So any final words, Destri?
Nope, I think you covered everything right there. So thanks so much for having me on here with you, Jeff. I'm excited to go on this journey, and 2026 is going to be super fun.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.